Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Fake Accents Unite. I am joined, as always, by the esteemed Britisher. Good evening, sir.
Hello, everybody. I am barely alive. Yes. As I was saying, we seem to be suffering from extremely bad coughs that clearly seem to be pointing towards the two of us and the two of us alone, suffering from a strain of super corona.
Some have accused us of being hypochondriac in nature, but to those people I simply call them agents of Lammy, government shills.
Precisely, yes.
And otherwise, yes.
I can only point to Spike Milligan, who said he wanted the following inscription on his gravestone.
Do tell.
I told you I was ill.
I don't know why that's tickled me quite so.
It's Spike Milligan was a comic genius. He, I think, even Monty Python pretty much, admit to taking a lot of inspiration from him. It's sort of the ultimate expression of Irish humour. Dear Spike Milligan.
Yes.
I mean, did you what was it? Did you ever catch the one where he was on Have I Got News for You? And I don't know what Prince Charles had been up to or whatever, but Spike Milligan was on the panel and he just kind of sheepishly looked at the other panelists and went, "Grovelling little bastard, isn't he?" And after that, he sent a letter to Prince Charles in which he said, "I assume a knighthood is now out of the question." To which, pretty much by return post, he received a knighthood.
Amazing. I'm just after your comment about Spike Milligan's gravestone. I've pulled up a list of ridiculous things to have on your gravestone. So someone has on theirs, "If you can read this, you're standing on my boobs." Now, whether or not this is male or female, it's unclear. Yes, I told you I was sick is on there, definitely. Spike Milligan. I was hoping for a pyramid.
Yes, I think that's appropriate. Yes. Is this all? Yes. I was hoping for a pyramid.
Raised 4 beautiful daughters with only 1 bathroom, and there was still love. Now I know something you don't. Let me see. Here lies an atheist, all dressed up and no place to go. And for some reason as well, like the last one I'll share, someone's put a recipe for fudge.
Oh well, there you go. Yes, that's yes, I like that.
We appear to have been joined by a tailed feature. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Hello there, Fiskerma.
Feskerma.
Always a pleasure.
How are we doing?
Not too bad, although me and the Britisher obviously have contracted super corona. Something of the Boston strain, in reference to the Boston tea.
The Boston Corona Party, yes.
Yes, the Boston Corona Party. Just trying to make
references being rammed together there.
Well, you know what they say, reference humour being clearly the funniest and most witty of all retorts. But yes. Aaron Telford says, #Britisher for Prime Minister. And #Britisher for PM. What do you make of this, Britisher? Like, several times.
Yes, it frightens me. It frightens me that anybody should think that I am prime ministerial material. I mean, no doubt, of course, I am flattered, but yes, think again. Please do.
No one is more conservative about your prime ministerial manner than you are yourself, my friend.
I don't even know how to interpret that statement.
Literally would perhaps be a good start. Just nod and just go, "Yes, my son, yes." What do we have here? Scowen is telling me that he's sent me $5. Thank you very much, this guy. And it says 221 seconds late. Also, the total amount of time you've been late by would be comparable to spending weeks being spaghettified as you approach the event horizon. Or if you were a woman this late, you'd be in your second trimester. Apparently those two things are comparable, being stretched infinitely through the expanse of space by the event horizon of a black hole in what is effectively...
See, if you recall, last time round, I laid down the challenge that he should include bent space and a black hole in his soliloquy regarding us being late.
I'm just disappointed.
Lo and behold, here he is.
I'm just disappointed that in mentioning bent space and a black hole, he has interpreted this entirely literally and not included any of the...
In no way did he ever consider Kenneth Williams.
There's no alphabet people, and there's no never mind. We won't go any further with that. Goodness me! Thank you very much to Tragic Vision, British and Richard Orrit, who are continuing their channel.
I'm just trying to imagine where you could go with these things. The queer effect things have on time in at light speed. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Carry on quantum, is it?
Thank you. Yes, carry on quantum, precisely.
Apparently, chat's asking us, evidence violates community guidelines. The second says, are Britisher and Not So Obvious going to toss Bill Gates vaccines into the harbour? Do you know anything about Bill Gates vaccines yet, Britisher?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, Bill Gates has kind of turned into Mr. Vaccine.
He has.
Working a lot with the United Nations and being involved in a lot of vaccine programs. There are some people who are saying that in some cases this is going beyond the bounds of where it ought to. To be honest, I'm not sure. It's one of those things where you really don't know sort of what source material you can believe, if you know what I mean. I read an article whereby Bill Gates is throwing quite a lot of money at producing the 7 most promising vaccines. So when it comes to coronavirus, they've identified, various possible vaccines. And he has obviously taken some advice as to which are the most likely ones to succeed, and he's putting them into production.
Probably from Warren Buffett, no doubt. Which ones are going to be the most profitable and successful vaccines?
In this case, I'm not even sure how profitable it would be, because he's putting all 7 into production in the hope that he may have to throw 6 of them away.
Yes, I know.
And therefore, he already would have mass-produced the 7th one, rather than the world having to wait for that actually to go into production.
It becomes quite difficult as well, doesn't it, when you have the World Health Organization, for all their faults, saying things like, it doesn't appear to be any evidence at the moment of the concept of immunity when it comes to this virus.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not that's due to the fact that there are multiple strains, of which we've contracted the most deadly and fast-acting version, or whether or not it's due to, just poor data, we don't know. So, if you don't get immunity from beating the virus in the first place, then there can be no immunity per se. So it's just basically a hope and a prayer that it's not that lethal, which, according to the American data, it isn't. I got into a rather, I won't say it's an interesting argument, but a discussion with some colleagues of mine who got very angry at Donald Trump for tweeting out that basically because we have had, we are ahead of the curve, we have the best testing, we are so amazing that's the reason we've got 1 million cases. And of course, people very dismissive go, "You're not the most amazing. you're anywhere between 2nd, 5th, and 40th in terms of per capita testing. Now, obviously, that means that his idea that we're the best at giving out tests, in terms of the per capita thing is a problem. But it is accurate that they have administered the most tests of any nation.
Yes.
So, I think by something like 5 million, so it's like sixfold above its nearest competitor, and so they appear to have they found that that there's 1 million people who have coronavirus. That's not something which should really, if you're going to attack Trump over something, as much as some people might find his constant pro-USA rhetoric a bit grating, he can't really be faulted on this question. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. The whole thing kind of boils down to, what is the fault of any individual administration and what is the fault of just an inherent system? You know how I like to refer to the sausage machine, that some things go into sort of the government process and come out the other end, and the government may have changed since, but some of the things are still coming through the sausage machine. Well, some of this planning, for example, is not really down to every individual administration. It's not as if the first thing any new prime minister does is tell me about any contingency planning for potential disasters.
Especially
I want all of them on my desk tomorrow.
Especially the specific one, which I have a hunch may just be around the corner. Yeah.
But you understand what I mean? So, in a way, one relies on the system having sort of done its due diligence, if you know what I mean, of having plans in.
Yeah.
I think what we are discovering is. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, referring back to that. Of course, that our government got dragged through the mud for disbanding its pandemic task force, or something last year, or something to that effect. And of course, this despite the fact that pandemic activists, for lack of a better term, have been, and experts in the field have been talking about how we are woefully underprepared for a pandemic threat. What I am wondering is, for every other conceivable natural disaster, how many people on there are saying, "Oh no, we're perfectly well prepared for that." It's like when we have the periodic flooding, which happens, especially in the West and the Midlands. It's like, well, every single time that comes up, it goes, well, we don't have enough flood defences. It's like, yeah, but we try a little bit each time and try and make it a little bit better, but no one's ever happy enough with all of it, because when a disaster happens and a flood defence breaks or something like that, you don't hear about the 10 other flood defences which haven't broken. And so in a similar vein, for every kind of conceivable human-made or natural disaster, there will always be pundits out there saying, "I called it. I said we weren't prepared for this. I said that we weren't." Yeah.
I think when it comes to their having got rid of their sort of pandemic team, I think the question is, who is delegated to take up that role instead? Because it won't have been that they will have just declared, "Oh, we've decided from now on pandemics will never happen again." A bit like Gordon Brown declaring the end of boom and bust.
Oh,
and
grief, yeah.
Therefore, we're just going to get rid of the team that deals with it. My assumption is that what has been declared as, "Oh, they got rid of this was totally irresponsible," was in fact some sort of reorganization. And that therefore a specific team was no longer named, but
see.
somebody else was supposed to, somebody else was supposed to step in.
So a subcommittee got absorbed into another committee.
Basically. Yeah, something like that. But generally, I sort of think if you look at, places like South Korea, and I think Taiwan, who kind of really went strong right from the beginning on testing.
Yeah.
And they clearly had the capacity to do this. and on tracing. And again, they had the capacity to do this. So they seem to have in place a system whereby if something hits us, we'll test anybody suspected of this, and we'll then trace any contacts these people have had. So in in South Korea, they lost control of that for a while because it turned out there was one particular individual who turned out to be a super spreader, as they like to call it, in one of those sects they have over there.
Right.
And like that, it kind of spread to thousands and thousands of people and got back out into the system. So even though it looked as they had it under control, they lost control. But guess what? They regained control. So it does appear that those countries that had had the experience of SARS and then took steps, as in, okay, how do we prevent something like this from happening to us in future? They seem to have fared better.
Yeah.
So
it's also
not just a matter of how many tests you do; it's what you do with the information you get out of the test.
It's also interesting that the two nations who appear to have fared best per capita, that being Taiwan and South Korea, are the nations who are the most skeptical of China.
Yes,
because of course they live in relative close proximity, and they don't trust a word that comes out of them because
they have absolutely no qualms about saying, "Fine, no flights from China, goodbye."
And the Taiwanese in particular have to deal with because apparently new viral strains are quite common in China, but they don't usually get very far. So, but the Taiwanese are quite often having to implement not as serious as today, but semi-serious measures in order to do this. And I mean, you can just note it's in the culture of the Far East Asian countries as well. How long have we remarked on Chinese tourists, for instance, whenever they travel on public transport or by air, wearing their face masks.
Yes.
As they go along anyway.
But as I say, they had the problem of SARS, and I think that kind of the culture change that is effectively still happening.
Well, cutting out a little bit there, Britisher. Can you just say that again?
I think that the experience of SARS brought about a culture change over there that is still to happen over here. I mean, I think everybody agrees that whatever the new normal is going to be, that, comes about once things open up again, it will never quite be the same again. And, would anybody be surprised if a lot of people, particularly in large cities, are walking around with face masks after this?
No, not at all. I think we're moving in, especially with Boris, saying, we need to start looking at what we can phase back in now.
Yeah.
The outcry that I've seen, not particularly on Twitter, to be honest, but certainly on Facebook, which, as we all know, is primarily boomer territory. But although actually there's a lot of misinformed young people on there as well, who I have known who are just panicking, are still in panic mode about this, So I could hear my neighbours cavorting in the garden. I mean, I didn't use the word cavorting. I'm British. I can hear my neighbours having a garden party next door with two of their friends. It's just disgusting. That sort of thing. I hope they catch coronavirus and die. That's basically the sentiment.
Yeah, it's always a good choice. It's always a good thing to wish coronavirus on your neighbours. I mean, it's not as if you would be in close proximity.
Yes. And lots of people who are saying idiots as well. And it's just like really? Like most people, especially where I come from, especially if you don't live in the cities, right? Most people live within a drive's distance, and especially in the culture of, you don't want to be out too long with coronavirus walking where other people have been walking. You effectively walk the 5 to 15 feet from your front door to your car, Then you get in your car, you drive with a filtered air system in it anyway, which means you're unlikely to catch something there, to your friend's property, where you park on their driveway or just outside on the road, and you walk the 15 to 20 feet to their door, and then that's as far as it goes. It's like there's not that much. People's social circles are not that wide. I think that if someone was having a garden party with like 20 people there, it was like a wedding reception in a back garden.
True. I mean, I don't think it's so much. I don't think it's so much that the fact that people are driving, which is upsetting those folks. It's the fact that people are still intermingling.
Yes.
And I mean, if there's one way to stop this, is to stop mingling.
Well, they do get annoyed when you go out driving because they go, well, what happens if you have a crash? And then the NHS
if you have a
have
crash,
to
you're
save
going to
you.
break down.
All right, I'll walk into the middle of nowhere. Oh, wait, not allowed to do that either.
I know that...
you can hear the grating voice of the Scotsman here, can't you? Because up there, everything is that far apart that, I mean, it's almost as if they need a private helicopter just to get to Tesco's.
Yes, I'm being chased by drones daily. I don't mean military ones.
The SNP Special Drone Service.
Exactly. They might as well start delivering parcels. There's that much of them.
Will we be touching on the Scottish legal shenanigans? Not so obvious.
Do tell.
Tails,
if you
do you want
planning
to?
On it, then
do you want Tails? Do you want to sort of dip into this?
Why would I give the task of laying out what's happening in Scotland to the mentally disabled who live there? Why, Britisher, you've got to be the one to explain this, so that the poor Scotsman understands.
I touched upon this in the week that was. I particularly liked the Guardian headline.
I'm sorry, I would allow Tail to answer it, but you ran with my just random insults and poor Tail.
I know, I didn't even get a word in.
Okay
then.
Yeah. You must be. You're quite correct.
Dumped on the Scotsman. Now we'll just move on with the story. Yes.
This is clearly mental handicapping. How could I have been so stupid as to allow?
Come on, Britisher, Anglo-splain to me.
Anglo-splain, yes, indeed, yes. So now listen here.
Jock.
No, I touched upon this in the week that was, that there was this wonderful headline by The Guardian, which announced that blasphemy was to be abolished in the Scottish hate crime bill. And you just went, what an interesting angle. They're actually trying to take the sort of libertarian angle on this. As in, they're getting rid of something that would curtail what you can say.
Yeah.
And what are they replacing it with?
Is it a law called the Blasphemy Act?
Blasphemy Law 2.
Yes, it's very much Blasphemy Law 2.0, and I personally must admit I find it very, very suspicious that that the Justice Secretary who is introducing this in the Scottish government is himself a Muslim.
Oh, for God's sake. Blasphemy
so you've
Law
got
2 is the Mr. Boogaloo. Yeah.
You've basically, I think until now, I don't know when they introduced this change, but this concept of stirring up hate exists in Scottish law, but it has only
racial hatred.
Yes, but it only exists for race.
And has been in law since 1986.
And is that because there was too much anti-English sentiment rising once again?
Doesn't.
Don't count as people.
It was probably actually a sectarian issue. Probably.
You think this could have been an old firm thing?
Quite possibly, yeah.
Yeah. But now they want to introduce it and sort of across the LGBTQ plus board.
Well, yeah, it's anyone with a protected characteristic, which they're also
including age. Including age.
Yes,
so age will now also be included in this. So you can't stir up hate against an age group.
So you can't call people boomers without
Yes.
being arrested.
Precisely. I mean,
And
just
you
simple
can't-
things like that could already be suspect.
And you can't say, "Oh, stop being such an ignorant child." How dare you call me a child?
Well, the
When I am a
example
child.
the example I used was, if you have some internet debate about the measures taken regarding coronavirus, and say somebody says, maybe some of the elderly need to die, rather than us close down the entire society and in the entire economy and cripple the entire economy for decades to come in order to try and save them.
And resulting in
So
more deaths.
if somebody postulates that position, how open is he to the accusation of stirring up hatred against, on the basis of age?
I'm sorry,
So-
Tailed, but looks like you're going to have to become a based Christian music channel from now on. You've got no other options.
Oh no, I'm sure being Christian's pretty haram, to be honest.
Yeah, but at least you can be covered by the blasphemy laws until they become more specific, where it just becomes the Sharia Act 2025.
I think you would be better advised turning your channel into the top 10 muezzin calls to prayer.
Mira J points out that 20-year-old Britisher jokes are soon to be illegal.
Oh, I think any British joke ever told and ever to be told is already close to illegal as it stands, and that's just based on the basis of them being so dire. But no, I mean, obviously, when it comes to this thing, the thing that annoys me about the announcement, we've got rid of the blasphemy law, and clearly what they're doing is they're just introducing another blasphemy law, and we all know which religion in particular it is going to protect.
Yes.
But you would sort of think, oh well, it's just like for like, just with a different religion, and you might sort of grumble about that. But that's not really the full truth.
No.
Because when is the last time anybody in Scotland was prosecuted for blasphemy?
1842.
Well, so there you go. So it's something that is on the statute book, but it's a dead statute. It's not actually being used. Whereas what they're introducing in its stead would very much be intended to be used. Do you understand what I mean? It's something is being brought in which will lead to, direct court action.
It is.
Whereas what is being phased out is something that nobody in living memory, recalls ever being used.
It's a real shame that I can't just flat out say that Islam is evil in Scotland anymore. It's just a real pain.
To be fair, right, at the moment, the hate crime, even the proposed ones, you need to do something else before you can be done for the hate crime. So you need to have assaulted somebody or harassed somebody
it's like
or
told a joke.
Hate motivated.
Essentially, yeah. So a hate crime is something what they call a statutory aggravation. So like a real
telling
crime.
a joke.
No. Well.
Oh yes. Well, yes.
Well, if you say something grossly offensive that can also be, deemed hate.
It's such a
yeah.
It's such a stupid premise that can be, can be effectively dismantled with just a single example, which is if someone breaks into your house and steals your television, does it matter whether or not he broke into your house and he stole your television because he wanted the money, or because he thought you were a prick and he wanted to steal your television and he hated you? It's
like, does it matter why this person got punched in the face? Does it matter the reason behind it? It's still an offence.
Or do you think
why add something else to it?
It's like, yeah, in the same way, it's like most terrorist-based offences, which you would think would fall under a lot of this hate crime sort of stuff. It's like, if you ever manage to get if you got the 9/11 terrorists on there, I doubt they're doing it out of a place of love, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so you arrest a terrorist.
You arrest a terrorist,
they
and you put it through. It's
they
like,
get like 25 years in prison or something like that, and then the judge goes 2 years on top of that because you did
because you don't like women very much. It's like, what are you doing?
Because some gays were killed at the same time.
Yeah, it's nonsense, especially given the fact that as we keep reiterating,
that's actually a good point. If you were a terrorist and you were to just blow up the London Tube,
yes.
would you get a lesser sentence than if you were to blow up a gay club in London?
And why? Even if you killed more people on the tube, because it was a hateful thing that you did. It's like, yeah, just.
Well, because I would just also like to point out that Count Dankula was arrested under the Communications Act 2003, which is a UK law, not a Scottish law.
Yes.
But he did have
yes.
part added on top.
A Blairite law, if I recall.
Yes,
it was the fact that he was dragged through a Scottish court, wasn't it? That was the difference.
I particularly liked the appeal being rejected.
In
which he was
you enjoyed that, you sick bastard.
Well, I mean, it really it was really surreal to see a case that was that blatantly a miscarriage of justice.
Yeah.
To then have the judge who has to consider whether this should be allowed to go to appeal, not only say, no, we are rejecting this because, the technical reasons given by your legal team are insufficient.
I'm just going.
You ought to count yourself lucky that you weren't sent to prison in the first place. And then you think, oh yes, this definitely strikes you as someone who is completely impartial.
No, that wasn't what happened. It was Marx's lawyer or solicitor was told that he was lucky that he wasn't done for contempt of court or perjury or something like that.
But it also included a line in which it was said that Dankula is lucky for not having been imprisoned.
Well, I think it's slightly worse to threaten the solicitor as well for doing his job of appealing.
I'm still so caught up on just how stupid the concept of it. Can let me finish? I just
want to grow bananas in Scotland.
What?
Probably can in a few years' time.
Can either of you still hear me?
Yes, we can still hear you.
Perfect.
But you're cutting out.
We were just ignoring it.
I see. What I was basically saying was like I'm still caught up on just how stupid the concept of a hate crime law is. So it's like, let's say that you have a family member who is a drug addict, and they are financing this with their savings or an inheritance or something like this, and you decide that this person you love them and they're destroying their life through the use of narcotics or whatever. So you steal that inheritance from them. Do you get time off your sentence because you stole from them out of a place of love? Or is it considered a hate crime?
I think you're breaking up.
You broke up quite a lot there, so...
That is unfortunate. I said, if you steal from a family member with a drug habit to prevent them from indulging the drug habit, do you get time off your sentence for committing it out of an act of love?
I see what you mean.
An anti-hate crime.
So it should be an anti-hate crime. There should be...
Well, is it not true in France? They have like crimes of passion and stuff like that.
Yes, but that goes in all directions, really.
But
if you kill somebody just having discovered them sleeping with your wife, then that's a crime of passion.
In France, all crimes are crimes of passion.
What accent was that?
I have no idea.
Suddenly you slipped into Hungarian there for some reason.
I have no
Yeah,
idea.
nearly.
Right. So moving us.
Just to sort of say, when it comes to the whole thing, I understand where the basic idea of sort of basic hate crime legislation came from. But surely, once one realized that this wasn't working, or what the consequences of this were, that's when you would have thought, surely somebody would go, okay, yeah, this isn't working as we intended. This isn't going to turn the world into a nicer place. This is just being used different group now to bully.
It's special pleading rather than protection.
But at no point so far, really, has there been the political insight and, within the people, among the people in charge, to kind of say, okay, this really isn't working, and then start to kind of work to dismantle this thing. In some cases, there has been a slowing down or perhaps even a moratorium on these kind of things. But nobody has kind of yet, and I think this is more than likely coming, nobody has yet kind of declared, okay, this really doesn't work. It was completely counterproductive. This was a political misstep. Let's just do away with this whole thing. Because
no one ever does that. That would involve admitting fault.
Well, I just feel that we have gone down a complete blind alley here, and we may have started down the alley for all the right reasons, but surely by now it is self-evident, unless you are indoctrinated to the back teeth, that this is a negative.
Because don't forget, it's not obvious to a lot of people, because what they do is they look at the number of hate incidents that have risen across the country.
Yes, they can only rise. Yes.
And that are up by whatever it is, threefold in the last 12 months or something like that. And they go, oh my goodness, thank God we put in this hate crime legislation, because the far right and other hateful people are basically trying to destroy the nation again, and we can't have that.
Yeah, you create new categories of crime and then complain that crime has gone up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
During an era of rapid expansion of the criterions for such crimes. Yes. It is.
The thing with me is
ludicrous.
there doesn't seem to be any party opposing these, though. I mean, the Scottish Tories out.
I mean, the only party that I'm aware of nationally that tried to do anything was UKIP. But of course, no one voted UKIP because of the hate crime legislation. It's just not something in the public interest, because it's something that the vast majority of the public are just going to go along with, because the moralising language of it is just about right.
Yes, but I think it's coming.
I don't know. I think
you can sense that something is coming.
I think what will happen is that the criteria for this will get broader and broader and broader, until it so happens that so many people are being accused of being hate. I mean, you saw it with the chap who had the phone call where the police said, we're here to check your thinking.
Check your thinking,
right?
Yes.
And that was something which got some public rise, but it was still only a small one, I think. And until the media basically gets a hold of it and decides to run with it, because at the moment they're all behind it, or at the very least, it's impartial. They're not promoting opinion pieces that are critical. All of those are in fringe publications or online. But yes, we're waiting for something to slip into the public consciousness, which would be, I think, at the point where everyone has 1 to 2 degrees of separation from someone who has either been accused or is going through proceedings for a hateful incident. And there will be the people who... that will split people again into 2 camps. The people who are the holier-than-thou, who are already basically saying, well, why would you be hateful when you could just be quiet? Which is exactly the rhetoric which was used for, of course, the grooming gang victims. And then there's the other people who are going to be, suitably outraged by the whole thing and feel like the whole thing is a violation of their dignity, their rights, and so on.
Well, if experience is anything to go by, how many times have you heard of this MP or that MP, or particularly, more importantly, this newspaper or that newspaper advocating for Sophie's Law or Megan's Law or something like that? So some particular, some person has been the victim of some grievous crime, and then there is the demand for a change in the law.
Mm-hmm.
More often than not, it's a demand for a freestanding criminal offence, punishment for this to be increased or something like that. And they like to tag onto it, the name of the victim or something like that.
Yes.
In order to have sort of more emotive punch.
And it's almost exclusively either a woman or a child.
Yes. And I think it's more than likely only a matter of time until somebody gets caught up in the gears of this thing who garners, public sympathy. I think we would all agree that someone like Count Ancula is more than likely not the person to be the kind of the victim.
Well, I know
that people kind of look to and say, "Oh, poor him." Do you understand what I mean?
I mean, the closest thing that I can think of to something like that happening was probably, aside from, I can't remember who it was, someone, a parliamentarian, basically proposed a law, and it got completely shut down. But in terms of continual campaigning, that I think it's Sammy Woodhouse, who's one of the grooming gang victims. I know I wax lyrical about grooming gangs quite often, but I think there are people who are trying to bring in Sammy's law in that regard. But all that happened was, I think she was given one interview by Channel 4 or something like that, and one by Sky, and then that's it. They were done with her. They didn't want to talk to her anymore, and so she's...
Put it like this: when it comes to these laws, never underestimate the power of the newspapers. I mean, I know we say they are dropping in circulation and whatever, but their actual political influence as the agenda setters is still enormous.
Their access is somewhat unparalleled, and also, when we talk about the media diffusing into the internet, for instance, and the fact that they can't compete with the whole of the internet. They can't compete with the whole of the internet, but they can compete with individuals on the internet.
Yes, and the internet still references them.
Yes, everything that if you every single commentary channel is either a criticism of, or a kind of a punditry take on, a mainstream media article piece. I mean, that's where Saga of a Cat's livelihood comes from, right? And very little I see in terms of quality investigative journalism. And I wonder whether or not, to a degree as well, it is gatekeeping by, the Society of Journalists, or the Institute of Journalism. I can't remember what it's called in this country, which basically is the gatekeeper for you to be treated seriously, get yourself a press pass. You need to have some clout behind you anyway to get access to events. I mean, I know, it's from a slightly adjacent source, but so there's a chap on YouTube called Angry Joe. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I'm aware of him.
He is basically he's a gaming review channel, and he's one of the bigger players on YouTube. He has over, at the time of this thing, he had over 2 million subscribers. But when it came to, he went to a big event, E3 or something like that, big gaming conference, and he really struggled to get access with the press lot to kind of like the pre-release things, and eventually.
Oh, I am now remembering who this guy is. This is
And
a kind of bearded chap who likes dressing up as.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm
Anyway,
with you.
so he had this big thing, and eventually, it took about a couple of hours, but they finally went, "Oh, actually, this guy's got quite a big influence." But it was the fact that he's, in terms of in gaming circles, he's either a meme or people watch him, and he can be quite entertaining. So, he's been embroiled in his own controversies over the years, anyway. But in terms of the mainstream and publishers and that sort of thing, no one had ever heard of him. Until, some intern says, actually, I watched this guy on YouTube. He has got millions of followers.
This is a guy who will review a Superman film and will appear dressed as Superman and things like that.
Oh, he'll do a skit at the beginning, just doing it. And they are now like a team of multiple people. But you'll get things like that. I remember I watched an interview with a chap called Freddie Wong, who he has 1.5 billion views on YouTube. For instance, he produced short films basically with some decent animated effects, especially for the time. And then he tried to do his hand at actual filmmaking, and to get interest from either filmmaking magazines, but also people in Hollywood and Los Angeles and that sort of thing. And again, no one had ever heard of him. And of course, when he mentions YouTube, people go, "Oh, that thing for kids." With the stuff on it, there's no kind of pedigree behind it in the same way that mainstream, long-term publications and publishing houses and producers have that kind of reputation. And the internet is just fragmented into dozens of hundreds of commentators, but not really anything. There occasionally are attempts to create news, a new news corporation. But I mean, like, the last big news corporation to be created was probably Fox News, right? And that required a billionaire, basically, to make a bet. And that was the reason that it existed.
But, in order to sort of bring this back to the newspapers and their power, we all know about the influence of folks like Owen Jones and The Guardian and whatever. But don't underestimate the Daily Mail, Telegraph, and The Sun.
No.
So they're right-wing. Now, we know that the right is not happy about the sort of cloying political correctness, and particularly these hate crime laws. So now imagine that the Sun gets hold of a mother of 4 or something like that who is being prosecuted for having, and she's a living angel. And imagine then the Sun, the Daily Mail, and the Telegraph throwing their weight behind her, possibly with the Times and whatever. That something like that can shift things. Those are the ways in which these laws often come in. I mean, the Sun, the Daily Mail in particular, have a sort of long-standing record of being campaigning newspapers. So they love these Megan's laws and whatever. The thing is, one needs the right vehicle in order to be able to twist the arms of the politicians.
Yes.
And if something like that were to come along, I think the will by the media would be there. So not by the Guardian and stuff like that, but there would be a substantial section of the media that would be willing to throw their weight behind it. And I think there would be a large section, well likely the majority of the population, that would be willing to back this because they're sick and tired of this by now.
So I don't know. Maybe I just don't share your faith, Britisher. Maybe I'm jaded in my old age.
Well, I think when it comes to sort of old age, the thing it does teach you is that these things do happen, but they happen slowly. They happen gradually.
Yes.
And first a bit like with the whole virus thing, first you need to reach the peak. And then you get sort of the long descent, the long tail behind it.
The somewhat of a, what one might call the snowball effect.
Yes, but it takes time for this thing to wear down. So it kind of comes up very quickly. And in particular, you get laws put in place. And once you have laws put in place, it's large. But if these things run completely counter to the popular will, then sooner or later they are undone, or they are simply rendered meaningless. I mean, there are quite a few laws that over time just get ignored. That it's almost as if one decides, okay, yes, we've still got this on the statutes, but we'll just pretend it isn't there.
Yeah.
I mean, to a certain extent, that happened, for example, with marijuana prosecutions and things like that. So,
yes, Peter Hitchens is right in the sense that we don't prosecute that, really.
So, you do get to the point where one does eventually take into consideration the public will. No matter how reluctantly. And I think it is due with this. Yes, it will come.
I mean, you say that, but I mean, a pertinent example is that the number one issue that is always on the ballot paper, effectively always on the ballot paper, is immigration. And the vast majority of the British population want immigration reduced, and not just reduced, but reduced substantially. And yet, this is something the public will is consistently ignored, and has been for 20 years.
Yes, and yet it hasn't happened yet. But do you feel it will happen? Because I feel it will. I think that sufficient pressure needs to build up against it, and it then eventually does happen. And I think when it comes to immigration, I think that's a clear-cut case that it seems increasingly on the cards. That you feel that the government, particularly the Tory government, is running out of it's running out of ways to turn away from this.
See, I don't know, because what happened was I felt like that moment was coming, because we had like a little crest of a wave, right, where it was at the 2016 election, where the Tories were panicking because UKIP was at 15% or whatever, and primarily campaigning on their anti-immigration stance. And so you had Theresa May's government, who decided that they wanted to reduce all these. They wanted to, we were going to reduce immigration. We were going to have this net target of whatever it was, 20,000, 30,000 a year or something like that, and massively bring it down. And of course, everyone jumped ship to the the establishment candidate, effectively, because they were right, well, we don't have to deal with all this other stuff that UKIP's peddling, which we're not quite sure about. We should just, we can go back to the tried and true Tories. And of course, they just don't follow through, because they're remarkably inept. And I feel like that, instead of that prompting a second wave, because I mean, UKIP was completely destroyed past the Brexit referendum anyway. You have the there's no other large group of people, I would say, who are there and ready to step in to produce either another party or another pressure group that's going to represent that will of the people, because people have already had the failure, as it were, of both UKIP and the Brexit Party. To a lesser extent as well, I think what's weighing on people's minds is the fact that the Liberal Democrats failed to become any kind of real alternative, and then fell to their own ideological purity testing, to the point now where everyone thinks that they're completely insufferable, and they are. So I don't know whether or not public faith is there enough in anything other than the Labour-Conservative divide at the moment to embrace anything which is going to provide change in the next generation or so. I don't know. It would have to have something would have to happen which would shake up the establishment so badly that people are forced to turn to other stuff.
Well, I would always say, think 10 years back, then think 10 years back again, and so on. Just go through the decades, and you will see remarkable changes in policies here, there, and everywhere. So it will not happen in 6 months. It will not happen in 2 years.
I'm not looking
But
at.
if you look at it over a period of a decade, it's just too you can't foretell what the influences will be that eventually enable something. But
as as
I think what you can say is that pressure is growing,
as
and eventually it becomes relentless, and one has to give way to it.
there also needs to be a representative who can represent the will of the people without being too distasteful to everyone else. Nigel Farage was someone who there are a great many people who liked him, but he's a very Marmite character. He was despised
Yeah.
by a huge number of people. You don't have a kind of Churchillian character who is rising up with the respect of the one side and the approval of another in order to champion this. I think that to be honest, I'm a little bit black-pilled on it now. I always used to think when the 2021 census comes out in 2022, that the statistics from that will shine a light on, just how much of a change there's been, because between between 1996 and 2011, the immigrant population of Britain went from 1 in 20 people to 1 in 6. Obviously, cultural clashes have increased because of this, and because of the doctrines of multiculturalism.
That was an interesting cutout you just performed there.
Oh,
because
did
the
I?
immigrant population went from 1 to 6.
Oh, it went from 1 in 20 to 1 in 6.
It was just beautiful. It's just the timing was.
I think
but please go on.
I think it's a Discord issue rather than anything that's going on over here. But So on the other hand, when the 2021 census comes out, it'll be interesting to see what 10 years of continued high-level immigration has done in order to bring that down, and whether or not that's why we're seeing some issues. I think it's also interesting. It'll be interesting to note the demographic shift and the location of those demographic shifts, because obviously it's just. I think one of the common things to be said now is it's like in 2011 the cities were majority foreign, and now it's just that the cities are foreign. There's hardly anyone living there of natives.
One of the questions that I think you have to ask throughout all this, because you touched upon ineptitude, and I think with a lot of this, it is government being afraid of its own ineptitude.
True.
So in a way, knowing that it's inept, and wondering which is the larger problem to tackle. Sort of a bit of a Jim Hacker situation. with Sir Humphrey kind of smiling at him knowingly.
A very courageous move, Minister.
Precisely. So when you've got issues like immigration, it's easy to say, well, let's just stop the immigration. But obviously, we know that there are various political pressure groups and lobbies, the economical lobbies and whatever in there. But on top of that, there is also the question, the kind of vexed question of the education and the training system. So if we do this, does Britain now look any nearer being able to produce sufficient number of nurses, plumbers, and professions like that than it did 10 years ago?
No.
And that's where you kind of have to sort of think, well, yes, it's perhaps that the politicians are almost afraid that they kind of realize, this is a really hard structural problem to tackle, that it's not just a matter of slapping in one statute and then standing on the balcony and letting the crowds cheer you. But in fact, you have to change things on quite a broad basis in order to allow for this to happen.
Especially now that they can't hide behind the old, well, the EU says argument
Yes,
anymore.
again, yes, that's very true. Once again, they can't blame somebody else.
They are entirely standing on their own merit, which we know
But
they don't have much.
you look at countries, say Germany or whatever. They don't seem to have a dramatic shortage of plumbers and electricians. Need to bring them in from abroad.
No. Bring back the
But
polytechnics, I say.
But for some reason, this seems perennially to be the case here in Britain. And that's where you sort of realize that there does seem to be sort of a structural problem that needs addressing before you can, or not necessarily even before, but it needs addressing hand in hand with the other. And we all know what politicians are like. Politicians like an easy solution that will get them lots of credit. But the idea of actually knuckling down and saying, okay, how do we solve this for the next coming 20 years? That they don't tend to be that big a fan of.
I know, yes, they're thinking election cycles, definitely. I feel like most of what you're describing can be attributed to both the closing and subsequent rising of polytechnics to university status, but also the kind of consistent devaluing of the trades. One of the things which I'm noting amongst many of my own age group, some who have been to university and some who haven't, is that primarily they're going, that guy who we always called a bit thick in class is now an electrician or a plumber or a labourer, and he's making anywhere between 40 and 60,000 a year, and living quite well, actually. Whereas all of us lot who went to university or deferred things in order to get this kind of higher education malarkey are now saddled with an awful lot of debt that person doesn't have. And we're also really, really, really struggling to find work because the discipline that we've chosen doesn't really allow it. Or we have chosen a discipline which, whilst it requires a great level of technical skill, is primarily, especially stuff with computers, they all envisage themselves as directing things and creating programs, the next great program. Instead, it ends up that they are shackled to data entry and grunt work, and it's very low paid compared to what they expected from their degree.
I think it's... Go ahead.
You can't really... I feel like there's a real disconnect between people's expectations of education in general and what you can get out of it, also to the degree to which, when you choose yourself a profession, there's still this big rhetoric of choose something that you're passionate about, that you love, and whatever it is, you'll make it work, which is true to a degree, but to another, it is also true that you've got to look for a gap in the market for which to market your skills. You can't just say, I'm going to pick this particularly obscure and niche thing and expect to have a graduate salary afterwards. It just doesn't work that way. And so I don't think the government knows how to market both the gaps that they want to fill and the to meet the expectations of and to temper the expectations, I should say, of the next generation, because they're such a what would you call it, an anti-stigma thing. You can't stigmatize someone for not wanting to do X, Y, and Z, but also we have real shortages in X, Y, and Z, and it's a real problem that we can't do it.
Well, I think that is there is almost a kind of a cultural thing in the economy itself built in. I mean, having grown up on the continent, over there, you will, most companies, most corporations will have apprentices and whatever. Even independent small companies, the independent joiner or plumber or whatever will have his apprentice, or even two. And that is very much baked into the system. And it's seen as the norm. And over here, it's kind of seen as something, oh, that's something the colleges do and whatever. And then they come for industry, Over there, it is actually the professions themselves who oversee the basic introduction and training of these people. I mean, one of the things that so many of the over here valued in all these Poles coming over was the fact that they had still been sort of fostered in the traditional apprentice system.
Yeah.
And that therefore they were, very good plumbers and very good electricians and very good carpenters. And that needs to, how do you reintroduce that into the British system, whereby it's not just Rolls-Royce that has 6 apprentices in their aircraft engine building plant, and large car plants and whatever, but that it actually sort of seeps into the entire sort of economy, the economic culture as a whole, in the same way that not all, but lots of the continent has that system in place, whereby it's seen as the natural thing to do for people to come out of school and start, as they're leaving school, start looking for an apprenticeship. And
I know that, they tried a couple of years ago to kind of rekindle the idea of local apprenticeships. They asked councils to start offering them. And I know that, for instance, near where I lived was one of my friends actually was on an internship to become of all things, what was it called? Trading standards officer. So he was on an internship for that, but also they tried to offer out a computer, an IT technician apprenticeship, and the idea was that you'd learn on the job how to manage all this infrastructure and so on and so forth, and it would take 3 years, and you'd be paid an apprentice wage for 2 of those, and then when you qualified, you'd have like an extra year of basically settling yourself in the job, and then you could go and apply anywhere. And people were up in arms about the fact that the apprentice wage was so low. But, and they couldn't get anyone to take the apprenticeship. And it was such a bizarre thing, because
it's just not a full wage, so it's...
But it's also, it's like, you don't seem to understand the...
I was just saying, you basically, you're not getting a full wage, but you're actually learning a trade.
Yes, that's the idea. And we know that but people are going, £2.40 or whatever it was an hour. That's not it. And I'm going, you cannot see the bigger picture here, can you? Why can you not see that you are, at the end of this, going to be fully qualified with an accredited certificate and no debt whatsoever?
Well,
and this is also something which is intended to be done, probably with the support of either friends or family, to kind of keep you there. And it's full time. So even if you're only earning £2.30 an hour or whatever it is, you are, at the end of it, you are still going to be able to live on that money, because full-time jobs in the area are few and far between in and of itself. You're probably earning more for your time than you would be in a Tesco part-time
job. The people I always like to point to, I mean, I don't know how it still is over there, But this tradition still existed, and that was the carpenters. And how should we say? It was one of those things, a bit like a traditional chimney sweep. If you see one going by, it somehow puts a smile on your face. The carpenter, there's a sort of a very traditional way of their going about. So they will do their apprenticeship, but thereafter they are not yet quite there. So they are now officially carpenters because they've done their carpentry apprenticeship. But now they become a journeyman, and in fact, you will still. Well, I mean, at least 25 years ago, you still saw them. I could well imagine they're still around today. They've actually got traditional dress that is from somewhere from the 19th century or whatever. They've got these broad-rimmed felt hats, and particularly they've got those flared trousers. The reason they're flared is so that the wood chips and whatever don't go down their boots. And what it is they literally just turn up at building sites and ask the foreman, you need any work. And because no, this is not someone that someone pretends to be if they're not really a carpenter. The foreman kind of knows, okay, these are trained folk. There's perhaps 3 of them or whatever. They're traveling all around Europe. They're going to no end of construction sites and whatever, so they're getting experience. Okay, yeah, no problem. We'll find something for you. And this might just be 2 or 3 days. It might be a week, and then they move on. And of course, if you've done that after your apprenticeship for another 2 years or so, by the time you come out of that, A, you've invested a lot of time into learning your trade, but B, my God, are you good? And that's when they accept them as master carpenters as opposed to just carpenters. And this is something that it's very old-fashioned, but it was definitely still in place when I was around. And you look at that and you just go, yeah, where did that go in Britain? Because we must have had systems like that in place once upon a time, 100 years ago. But somehow, with all the automation and whatever, we've lost some of these things, some of these systems that bring through these folk. And instead, what we've fallen to is, oh well, we'll just import them. And yes, I think if you want to solve the immigration problem at its root, the first thing you need to do is do away with the excuse to bring in ever and ever more people. And that is, you need to have the ability to bring about the professions you need yourself.
What also did you make of the fruit picker saga?
Well, I mean, this just screams sham at me. I don't believe this version of events, at all. I can quite understand that as an industry, they may need to bring in temporary workers, and then they leave again. But when it came to the fruit pickers that they were talking about being brought in during the lockdown, after thousands of people were basically reporting being either short of money or having lost their jobs, I don't for a moment believe that this is really due to economic necessity. I think it is due to a system being in place. So once again, just as with the apprenticeships and whatever, it's due to it being the way everybody is used to operating. So the farmer only needs to deal with a gangmaster. He doesn't have to deal with 50 different people he seeks to employ for a particular job to be done.
Did you see the numbers though? In terms of like what happened with local applicants?
No, I don't.
So, 50,000 Brits applied to do those fruit picking jobs. When attention was brought to it. Of those 50,000, 900 were offered a job. 900 were offered an interview. Of those 900 who were offered an interview, 115 were offered a job. And I think those are the only people who turned up, right, obviously, to work. So, of course, the headlines were 150, of the 50,000 people who applied for a fruit picking job, only 115 actually turned up to do it.
Yeah,
Well-
or they just said that only 115 people applied for the job in the first place, like British people applied for the job. And the other thing is, a lot of them, they go, right, okay, yeah, we've got a job here for you. It's 200 miles away, and you're not allowed to stay there. We have nowhere to put you up.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
not allowed to take
Well,
a caravan either.
no. It's also that you there's nowhere for you to stay. But apart from, we have our own accommodation, and we can pay for that for you out your wages, but it will cost you most of your wages. As Tom of Gulf City is saying in chat, he similarly to me, I think, used to live near a fruit picking farm, and it's like they don't pay the immigrants minimum wage. They give them accommodation and pay cash in hand, but the basically
Take them accommodation. It's like they all stay in a barn or something.
Well, the accommodation, which is effectively a field with either some prefab houses in, or sometimes it's not even that; it's just space for a tent, right?
Yeah.
And they'll charge half the wage, so it's like on paper they're paying them minimum wage, and in reality they're getting away with paying them £4 an hour, so that they can just collect the rest in accommodation fees. And obviously, no Brit is going to put up really with that kind of living standard if they can avoid it. Whereas people who are desperate coming from abroad will. And
I mean, I can imagine that there would be quite a bit of separating the wheat from the chaff. When you say there were so many tens of thousands, you would be surprised if they would, within those tens of thousands, find half of them that could actually do the job.
I'm not surprised at that, Britisher, although I would say that a 50-fold decrease.
Yes, no, I agree with you on that. It seems ridiculous that, I think we're all agreed they're not really willing to hire domestic labour. They much prefer to get people from abroad. They can deduct the supposed costs for accommodation and for food. We've heard about that, so it's below minimum wage, and at the same time, a lot of the admin goes out of the way because the farmer only deals with a team, and therefore has not got the complications of hiring and firing people that any other company has in hiring and firing staff.
Yes, it's amazing how willing you are to work when you being fired would result in the revocation of your visa, the loss of your home, and also the inability for you to get work elsewhere.
And if the little money you earn is actually a lot compared where you come from where you come from, if you know what I mean. But I saw something on the BBC where they showed some domestic people who had got jobs. I think it was picking asparagus or something like that. And it is pretty backbreaking work.
Yeah.
And I was struck by what kind of people these were. So one of them, for example, was a ski instructor and whatever. And you immediately sort of felt, yes, these are folks who are used to being A, outdoors, and B, being physical.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you sort of feel, okay, yes, the majority of people applying for these things more than likely won't be suitable. But you do feel, yes, it's ridiculous that you should end up with something like 150 out of 90,000. It clearly indicates a lack of will.
50,000.
Yeah, because there's a lot less paperwork and stuff involved in getting some migrant workers to do it, isn't there?
Precisely. You're organizing it through a gangmaster. You're only dealing with one person who will basically set out the cost and how much time he needs and whatever, and voila, that's done, and it's completely out of your hands. Whereas if you yourself have to organize it with locals, then as a farmer you may in fact have to hire someone to do the admin for you, even if it's only on a temporary basis while these people are coming and going.
Right here. I think we've just about talked this topic to death. So I will move us on. British Knight says, Britisher, I've just popped in and I don't hear you plugging my trainer line. What do I even pay you for? Care to
Well, you see, there is that. Yes. Do buy British Knight trainers.
What?
Yes. Clearly you have not been watching our This Week in History live stream, in which I relentlessly mock British Knight for the fact that there is a line of trainers, and has been since the 1980s, called British Knight. And there is a horrendous video of a 1980s British Knight sneaker advert, set to very, very cool corporate 1980s rap. That once in a while I like to play, just to remind British Knight of his station.
Because you so enjoy 1980s cool rap. That's
particularly corporate rap. Yes. Yeah, rap
the best
made
kind.
by an advertising agency. Yes.
That's the best kind. It's just one step below charity rap, isn't it?
It's pretty close to Christian rock. Yes, it
God.
really has its heart in the right place.
Muck says, important question, the most important question we haven't answered, and this will be the last question we ask on this topic. How did the Romans pick their fruits?
Well, that's an interesting question. That's a very interesting question, because that really goes to the heart of the latifundia and the small holders of Rome. So basically, the small farmers gradually got screwed by the rich landowning senators. It's interesting insofar that it kind of shows how, over a long time, if something is amiss in the system and it isn't fixed, it isn't adjusted, it will just continue to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And if you don't have a democratic process by which you can then readjust it, the pressure, as I was saying before, with immigration policy and whatever, with public opinion growing in one particular direction, pressure grows and eventually it just becomes irresistible. You have to address the issue. When it came to Rome, they didn't work that way, and therefore the situation just got worse and worse and worse. The rich landowners, not only had they themselves got a lot of land, but they were using their position to get public land, land that had fallen to the state of Rome through the various conquests of Italy. And they got that at knockdown prices for a lease. So a lease that would pretty much cost them nothing because they were well connected politically. So they got masses of land, and of course, because they had a lot of money, they could simply buy slaves to basically work the land. The farmers, the actual independent farmers, had absolutely no way of competing with it. So they were driven into bankruptcy. And eventually they ended up in the cities where they were living off the welfare of the state, feeding them on the grain dole. simply because they had just been driven into rack and ruin. Not only could they not compete on the market because the others were working with slave labor, China springs to mind, but at the same time, the Roman system was set up in such a way that landowners needed to serve in the military. So the farmers themselves and their sons might be called away for military campaigns that might last a year or two. So their own land was going to rack and ruin because they couldn't properly look after it. Meanwhile, they were driven out of business by competition that was, unfair. And the reason that caused a problem to the entire Roman state was precisely as I said. It's the landowners who provide the military. They are subject to serving in the legions. So if you bankrupt all your independent farmers, sooner or later you run out of people from whom to recruit your legionaries. And when some politicians tried to actually correct that development, then, of course, the rich senators saw to it that they got beaten to death by angry mobs. Yes, fruit picking was quite the thing in ancient Rome.
I see. So, not Romanians then.
No, they might have introduced Romanians, but they would have been Dacian slaves simply brought in. If this was one of the curses of Rome's success, they win all their wars, and by winning all the wars, they get to conquer those territories and take armies of slaves into captivity. And then they use really easily to work the land, driving all the people who actually need to get paid for their work out of business.
Those were the days. Yeah, no joking.
So yes, I mean the sort of latter days of the Roman Republic are a lesson that you can be too successful.
Indeed. All right, let's take things back to the modern day. A couple of things have happened today. The Trade Minister, Connor Burns, has resigned. Have you seen this?
No.
He basically...
was this the one who threatened somebody?
Yes, he used his position as an MP to intimidate a member of the public using veiled threats, says the Commons Standards Watchdog.
I think he was, if I recall correctly, he was in his letter to the other person. This was some financial dispute between, I think, his father and a third party. And he wrote that third party a letter in which he said that he was acutely aware of the problems it might cause were he to mention this in the House of Commons. Because, of course, you can't sue anybody for mentioning something in the House of Commons. So effectively he was saying, I could take the side of my father and I could absolutely butcher you in the public eye, and you wouldn't be able to do anything about it because I have immunity in the Commons.
Yes, he said, I am acutely aware that my role in the public eye could well attract interest, especially if I were to use parliamentary privilege to raise the case.
Yes.
Which prevents
it's very elegantly phrased.
Well, yes, I imagine he's a very elementary black.
It does effectively just mean, you do realize who I am.
The most elegant of blackmail, Britisher, clearly. So yes, the dispute was related to private family interests, had no connection with his duties as an MP. It was recommended that he be suspended for a period of no less than 10 days, and 7 days even. And but number 10 said we're replacing him, so he basically he has resigned.
I'm sort of just trying to imagine the conversation between his father and himself prior to that letter being written. So what are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to write a letter. What good is that going to do? Well, I'll make him an offer he can't refuse.
I have still yet to watch The Godfather, actually. Not that that's
well worth a watch. Worth a watch. Skip the third one. But yes, 1 and 2 are very, very good indeed.
I was going to say, not that it's a surprise to you that I haven't watched a film, is it, Britisher?
Well, I mean, it. I guess it would be too hard a work for you to watch something that was actually quality.
Or watch anything during quarantine whilst I may have extra time.
While you have a lot of time
in
on
fact,
your hands.
I just enjoy the fact that I can wake up an hour later in the day and use that hour for sleep instead of watching something that you've recommended. Yeah. So
I think a lot of people are doing a lot of sleeping.
I sleep so soundly, and it's the best rest I've ever had. I sleep with a smile on my face, knowing that doing so slights you. That's just what it is.
I mean, I actually recently have watched The Godfather again, just out of just for fun. And yes, it is a very, very good film. Yes, you just need to watch it.
It's been like I don't watch that much cinema, but I suppose the last film I watched recently again was my favourite horror film of all time. Do you know which one it is?
Wasn't there a horror film called House? And now you'll tell me you've never heard of it.
Called what, sorry?
I think it was called House, or The House.
No, I've not watched that.
It's some 1980s kind of comedy horror. It's got one fabulous scene in it in which the guy is trying to escape his house, opens the door in order to run out, and as he's opening it, who is standing there in the sort of half-rotted, decomposing condition, but some chap in a U.S. Army uniform who clearly he has history with, who just looks at him and goes, "You." It's just one of those wonderful moments when you're watching a kind of horror film, but at the same time you can't help but laugh.
I might have to look that up. No,
it's a long time ago since I saw that, but I remember enjoying it a lot because it was quite funny.
I was watching The Thing, John Carpenter's original. John Carpenter's version, not the original. The remake, yes.
That's good.
This is the one with Kurt Russell, isn't it?
It is, and it's a great film and has phenomenal practical effects.
Indeed.
Did you see Pingu's version, though?
Yes, Pingu.
Pingu.
By Lee Hardcastle, an absolute nightmare.
Then again, there is another Kurt Russell film, well worth seeing. Very, very much B-movie territory, but Overboard is a lot of fun.
Are you going to call Stargate a B-movie now?
I mean, Stargate was interesting in the visuals and whatever, but, as a film, come on.
It was very slow, but yes.
But Overboard is a fun film. It's Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn. And, yes, I mean, I would say particularly the opening 15 minutes or so are hilarious, where they just absolutely hate each other. So, yeah, anyone wants a good laugh, watch Overboard with Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn.
Why did we end up on this particular tangent? I can't even remember.
Somehow we got to The Godfather.
We got to The Godfather from the chap who's just resigned.
Oh, yes, the MP writing letters, yes.
So, let me see. So, I have three other things that I want to talk about this evening. The first is that the contact tracing app is now ready to download and is being trialled on the Isle of Wight. So this is an app, for those of you who aren't over here, it's a test, track and trace scheme that is being rolled out on the Isle of Wight from this week and then across the rest of the UK. All 80,000 households on the island are being urged to download the app, on which they will be able to report symptoms, order coronavirus tests, and have their movements tracked. What do we make of this?
Well, I thought it was
open to abuse.
I thought I think it was the chief medical officer, I could be wrong, who said that one of the benefits of this is that those people who are most likely to be the ones moving about are also the ones most likely to download the app. So The fear that pensioners and whatever won't really partake in this. Well, yes, but they are the ones who are most likely to be holed up in their houses and not going out.
Yep. Additionally, there's issues around privacy. The whole app is being managed at the moment by a private company, which a certain Dr. Ashton, who's basically a neo-Marxist Labour Party activist, that's his own words, not my not an assertion that I'm making about him, who also has a couple of skeletons in his own cupboard, basically saying, it's terrible that a private company is dealing with this, the government needs all this information. There's issues around the anonymity of the data. They claim it will be anonymous, but it's the personal data stored by it is the first part of your postcode, and then location data. So it's like, well, if you know the postcode that they're in and you have the locations that they're visiting, you can probably figure out who it is who's at these locations. Especially, if you put a little bit of time into it. The number of people, again, seems quite polarizing. A huge number of people who are saying, if you've got nothing to fear, you've got nothing to hide. Or if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear, rather. And then the other group of people who are saying, why do you need to know how many times I go to the shop and that sort of thing? There's no way you're getting my location data. The government clearly has an amazing track record with keeping things safe, not. Basically that's the gist of that thing.
The question I would have regarding this is simple. How is it to uninstall?
It's just an app, so you can uninstall.
This is what I mean. I mean, if it's easy to uninstall, then I wouldn't be bothered about this.
I'm not bothered about it whilst it's not mandatory.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like if they can find a way to tie the use of this app to ending the lockdown quicker, or it helps certain governmental bodies do their job easier, then I could see that it's one of those things where it's like, oh well, you can go out, but you'll receive a message on your phone when you are no longer allowed to go out, and you have to have this app in order to do that, and that sort of thing. I can see that being a thing.
Well, I mean, what is the situation in the countries who actually initiated this? Because it is, the inspiration comes from countries like Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea. They were the ones who actually first implemented things like that. Is it there obligatory, or is it, that just the population at large has taken it up in a large way?
I don't know. The only thing that I know about the kind of the international side of things is that at the moment a lot of people over here are trying to have a centralized system to make it work, whereas this puts them at odds with various other countries across Europe, and also where is this now? Yeah, Germany, Switzerland, Ireland, and a growing list of other nations pursuing decentralized apps. The UK citizens may face tougher restrictions on international travel if its system is not interoperable with others, if that makes sense. Yeah. But I don't know, unfortunately, about...
But you know what I mean? I think most people's worry is really the fact that one would seek to trace their every move.
Yes.
But I think the worry is that one would seek to trace their every move as a matter of course from now on. If it's just a matter of, we want to know where everybody is coming and going for the period of this virus.
They never, ever instigate a sunset clause like that. Never.
Well, but yes, I mean, if you can uninstall the thing, do you understand what I mean? That's So if you can have it on your phone, this virus, so that if you are in a building which then turns out to have had one or two people with the virus in it, and therefore you then get a notification, go get yourself tested. I see some practical merit in this. As long as you can then get rid of it once this whole scenario is over. I would be more concerned about government wanting everybody to have this app on their phone, and it's somehow some kind of worm that you can't get rid of again.
Or if it starts coming pre-packaged with things, it's a system app and cannot be uninstalled, that sort of thing.
Yeah, precisely. As I say, as long as you can just basically uninstall the thing once the crisis is over, and once you have no utility for this anymore, then I'm perfectly fine with it. Because it's you who sees the use in this, and not the powers that be, if you know what I mean. So obviously, they are the ones who want to have the system in place so they can inform people, but primarily the reason you are putting it onto your phone is because it's useful to you, and then you can get rid of it. And that to me, that makes perfect sense, as long as you say, as long as you're not basically told you must, or you're not allowed out, and at the same time, as long as it doesn't somehow lodge itself on your mobile device, and henceforth, as long as you have this mobile device, somebody somewhere knows at all times where you are. Because I think none of us want that. But as a tool during an epidemic, yeah, I would, I would be prepared to kind of give this one a waiver.
I need to do a little bit more research before I can give a more informed opinion on it, I suppose. But yes, that's the general gist of that story. I hear you've fallen afoul of some David Icke supporters this week, Britisher.
Yes, apparently. I saw them sort of popping up in my comments section in the week that was. I haven't looked again since, but obviously David Icke has been thrown off Facebook and YouTube within 24 hours, which is, again, it's a sort of pattern, isn't it?
It's amazing how synchronized these things are.
Yeah, it really is remarkable. So, obviously, this chap is a famous crank and conspiracy theorist.
Why would you say that about the Son of God?
Why would I say that about the Son of God who thinks alien lizard people run the planet? So,
and that they have secret meetings under Junction 15 on
precisely.
on the
M4, that specific
on the M4. Yeah.
How shall we say? You kind of point out that this is not right. We shouldn't be throwing people like this off the social media platform. And I kind of point out how, the right to free expression exists as much for the kind of loons who think they're the Son of God as it does for anybody.
I mean, it's the difference. Like, the difference is reach, isn't it? It's always about reach. It's never about the opinion. They claim it's about the opinion,
yes,
but it's actually about reach. Because if someone with severe low functioning autism makes a comment on Facebook that's is considered by the powers that be to be wholly inappropriate, but no one sees it, they don't really care. If David Icke, author of 20 books or whatever on various crack conspiracies, makes a statement, the man who claimed that the planes that crashed into the Twin Towers were actually holographically hidden cruise missiles, and various other nutty things, then
yes, I'm liking this chat more and more.
Exactly, but in the same way, like they cannot quantifiably tie as well what he's saying to why people follow him, right? And I have no doubt that there are a number of people out there who are proper David Icke, loons, who believe every word that he says that he's ever written down. But I think, much like Alex Jones, an awful number of people follow him purely because it's terribly entertaining to see the
Yeah.
slow self-destruction of a man completely convinced of his own lunacy. Do you know what I mean?
You know, what is particularly concerning about this David Icke thing, and this is interesting when you say it's about the reach, because once again, this group has popped up. They call themselves the Center for Countering Digital Hate.
Oh, joy!
At CCD Hate. Now, they were already involved in getting Katie Hopkins off Twitter for a while.
I see.
And now here they are back, and their tweet, the one they put out, which they've got it pinned, so they want everybody to see that it was they who did it.
Yeah.
You know, they've got it pinned at their account. Breaking. Our new report reveals David Icke's conspiracies about COVID-19 have been viewed over 30 million times. So, as you say, it's about reach. Next sentence, we are demanding that social media giants #deplatform Ike.
Of course. Because, and it's not only that, it's also not the fact that, the media's going, David Icke is promoting conspiracy theories about 5G and coronavirus. And then everyone goes, oh, David Icke, I've not heard about him in a while. What's this new thing? Let's look it up. Suddenly they've added to the view count of this thing. They must
just consider this for a moment. How many, how many people are behind this? You sort of wonder, are these two people in a bedroom, who call themselves the Center for Countering Digital Hate? We have no idea what this NGO is.
No. And often they are very, very small operations.
Surely they must be, really in with all the SJWs and whatever. So this is a bit like one of those virtue signaling tweets that immediately gets picked up by everybody, every Labour MP, Owen Jones, every Guardian columnist, and every Democrat, representative. Everyone, no. 398 retweets, 776 likes. So this isn't that big.
No.
And yet somehow YouTube and Facebook take note.
It's very strange.
And it's bizarre.
Also, when you consider these things, I mean, I don't know, there will obviously be the pundits out there who say, you're only making his audience larger, because the first call of the conspiracy theorist is, I am being silenced by the powers that be because I know the truth, and they don't want you to know the truth.
They're silencing the truth, yes.
And they just use that as an excuse. But I don't know, for instance, if you, like Alex, these people never really seem to go away, but take Alex Jones. I am curious. I know that in the initial aftermath of his deplatforming, views of his show and downloads of his app skyrocketed. But I don't know to the extent to which that has been a lasting thing, whether or not the amount of traffic that either goes through his site, or that the number of viewers who watch his show has remained static, or increasing at the same rate as it previously was, or whether or not it has actually had a very detrimental effect. And I suspect that there has been a medium to long-term detrimental effect on his viewership. Because otherwise, I don't know why these big social media giants would make that decision, unless it had some form of efficacy. As much as they're going, right, we want to distance ourselves from this individual or this organization. It's also a case that they don't, if they want to distance themselves from it, they don't want to have to engage with it, they don't want to have to listen to it all the time, whether or not that's due to their own guidelines or ideological purity or both or whatever. I imagine that there has to be some kind of tried and testedness to it that says, actually, this works out for us, going forward. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I think at heart, we're once again back to the problem of they're claiming to be a platform and not publishers, but they decide what gets to be on the platform.
Yes.
Um,
Sargon is currently postulating the idea quite a lot in public and private circles that perhaps eventually your social media profile will be owned by you, although that does throw up the issue that assumes there would either be one social media company owned and operated by the government in future, and no competitors allowed, or that private companies would have a lot of their their rights regarding the material that they're allowed to platform remove. But I don't know about that. It's especially considering that we have rules regarding things like obscene material, right? Like Facebook doesn't allow public-facing pornography pages, for instance, and we have age restrictions on it as well. You're not supposed to have a Facebook account till you're over 13, etc. Whether or not standards and practices for social media in Europe will ever become a thing. Do you know what I mean? It's a strange one.
I mean, I don't know if I don't know if we can ever have a situation where you kind of own your profile. I think it just boils down once again to the situation of the lobby. There always being a lobby demanding to know, how can you allow this? Is offensive. This is disgusting. How can you possibly allow? And pressure then being put on politicians and on platforms by politicians and so on, always boiling down to the fact that there is some irate, angry, humorless person somewhere saying, this shouldn't be allowed. How can they possibly allow this? Because one still hasn't somehow risen out of the dark ages and witch burning to the realization that maybe one just has to coexist with opinions and material of which one doesn't approve.
Yeah, it's also the case that, I mean, no, my train of thought has completely been lost because Bill Whitaker in chat said the water is turning the frogs gay.
Yep,
But,
indeed. Well, I referred to Mr. Ike as everyone's second favorite nut job, I believe.
after
Saying that obviously Alex Jones had already been expunged from social media.
yes.
So yes, I think there were various things at which the Ikeist might take offense. And yes, some people have told me that, oh, well, I wasn't taking him seriously enough, no doubt, because perhaps they agreed with something on Corona this or Corona that or whatever. But yes, as far as I'm concerned, the man's a bit of a joke, but I was still essentially speaking up for his right to say what he wanted to say.
Yeah,
Very often gets forgotten in these complaints. Yes.
Even if he's completely knucking futs. Indeed.
Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? That you have these kind of partisans who will rant at you for not sufficiently supporting someone when you're actually already saying you think they ought to be entitled to say what they want. You just don't agree with them.
Just because you're not singing from the same hymn sheet, you might be just one page over, but they don't like it anyway. Yes. Alrighty, chaps. I think that's going to take us to the end for this evening. Thank you very much for joining me for a chat. I know you were a little bit quiet there, but thank you for your contributions, Tale Feature.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And thank you as always, Britisher. It was a pleasure.
It was an honour and a privilege, as usual.
Thank you to everyone who continues to support this channel through being a member, buying merch, and through super chats, and to everyone in the chat who just stops by to listen. It's always a pleasure to see your contributions in the chat as well. Until next time, we'll see you next week for another Fake Access Unite. Take care, everyone, and God bless. Take care.
Cheers.
Toodle pip.